Letter 3. Plato wishes joy to Dionysius. In heading my letter this way, will I happen upon the most perfect form of greeting? Or should I rather write, wishes happiness, as I usually do when addressing my friends in letters? For you, on your part, according to those who were attending the festivals at the time, greeted the god of Delphi by paying homage with precisely this expression, and left it written, they say, greater than joy to you, and preserve the tyrant's pleasant life. But I would not address this invitation to either a man or certainly a god in greeting. To a god, because I would be inviting him to something contrary to his nature, since the divine nature is above pleasure and pain, and to a man, because most of the time pleasure and pain cause harm, breeding indocility, forgetfulness, foolishness, and violence in the soul. Let this be established on my part regarding the greeting. You, after reading it, consider yourself greeted in the manner that pleases you most. It is widely rumored that you dedicate yourself to telling some of those who carry out a mission at your court that, when you spoke on one occasion in front of me about your willingness to re-establish the Greek cities in Sicily, as well as to soften the situation of the Syracusans by converting the regime of government from a tyranny into a kingdom, I then prevented you from carrying out these projects, as you say, despite your great eagerness. That now, on the other hand, I am inducing Dion to do the very same thing, and that, using your own ideas, we are trying to snatch power from you. If making these statements brings you any benefit, you will know, but you are certainly committing an injustice against me by saying the opposite of what actually happened. And it is already enough to have been defamed by Philistides and many others before the mercenaries and the people of Syracuse for staying in the Acropolis, and that outsiders, if any error was committed, entirely blamed it on me, claiming that you followed all my instructions. But you know very well that I willingly collaborated with you on very few political matters at first, in the way I thought I could achieve something, and that I was only relatively interested, apart from some minor issues, in drafting the preambles of the laws, independent of what you or whoever else added afterward. I understand, in fact, that subsequently some of you have been reviewing these preambles, but no doubt the difference between the respective texts will be evident to those capable of judging my character. But, as I just said, I do not need to be defamed before the Syracusans or anyone else whom you can convince with these statements. Rather, defense is much more appropriate both against the former slander and against the one that has now been added to it, and which is growing in intensity and violence. Against this double slander, I am forced to present a double justification, demonstrating firstly that I was right to withdraw from all collaboration with you in matters of government, and secondly that counsel and opposition to which you referred, by affirming that I was an obstacle to your projects to re-establish the Greek cities, did not originate from me. Hear first the background of the first slanderous imputations I mentioned. I came to Syracuse at your and Dion's request. The latter was a man whose worth I had amply proven, and old bonds of hospitality united him with me. He was, moreover, at that intermediate and composed age required in collaborators by those with the slightest common sense when they have to deliberate on problems of such magnitude as yours were then. You, on the other hand, were extremely young, suffered from a great inexperience in matters where one needed to be supremely expert, and were completely unknown to me. Subsequently, perhaps through the work of a man, perhaps of a god, perhaps of a chance of fate, who used you as an instrument, Dion's exile occurred and you were left alone. Do you think it was possible for me at that moment to collaborate with you on matters of state, for me, who had lost the sensible companion and saw the insensible one at the mercy of a multitude of unscrupulous courtiers, not governing, but believing he governed, but in reality governed by men of such ilk? In those circumstances, what could I do? Was there any other remedy left to me than to do what I did? To bid farewell to politics from then on, putting myself out of reach of the slanders of the envious and trying by all means to reconcile the two of you as best as possible, despite your disagreements and differences. You are a witness to this, that I never stopped pursuing this goal. After 1,000 difficulties, we finally reached an agreement. I would embark for my homeland, since your country was at war, and once peace was restored, both Dion and I would return to Syracuse invited by you. This is the reality of the facts regarding my first visit to Syracuse and my new refuge in my homeland. Regarding the second part, when peace was restored you called me, but, without adhering to our agreement, you instructed me to go alone, promising that you would later bring Dion back. That is why I did not go, but by doing so I also incurred Dion's displeasure for the moment. He thought, in effect, that it was better for me to come and obey your orders. Subsequently, after the interval of a year, a trireme arrived with a letter from you, whose first words were that, if I came, Dion's affairs would be settled entirely according to my wishes, while if I refused to come the opposite would happen. Out of modesty, I refrained from listing the letters that arrived on that occasion from Italy and Sicily, yours and those of other people who followed your suggestions, and the many relatives and acquaintances of mine who received them, all of them urging me to leave and earnestly begging me to accede to your wishes. It was the opinion of everyone, starting with Dion, that I should undertake the voyage and not show reluctance. Nevertheless, I excused myself citing my age and, regarding you, I insisted that you would not be able to confront our slanderers, who wished to estrange us. I saw, in effect, then as I also see now, that the great and excessive fortunes of both individuals and monarchs usually give rise, the greater they are, to more numerous and considerable contingents of slanderers and pleasant courtiers who cause ignominious harm. This is the greatest evil that wealth engenders, as well as power in all its other aspects. However, setting aside all these considerations, I came, reflecting that I should not give cause for any of my friends to accuse me of having lost all that was theirs due to my negligence, when the possibility existed to preserve it. I arrived, and you already know everything that has happened since then. I claimed above all, as agreed in our letters, that you should repatriate Dion by introducing him into your intimate circle, specifying what this intimacy should consist of. If you had heeded me on this point, surely, as my opinion leads me to conjecture, things would have gone better than they have for both you and Syracuse and for all the Greeks. Secondly, I asked that Dion's assets be held by his family and not be administered by the administrators you know. In addition to this, I estimated that the usual annual income should be sent to him and even more, and by no means less, from the moment I was present. When I obtained none of this, I considered that the time had come to leave. Then you persuaded me to stay during that year, promising to liquidate all of Dion's capital, send half to Corinth, and leave the rest there for his son. I could mention many unfulfilled promises of yours, but their number is so great that I will refrain from it. You did, in effect, liquidate all of Dion's assets without consulting him, despite the fact that you affirmed that I would sell them without his consent, and then, my friend, you put a boundless, shameless finishing touch to all your commitments. You devised a means that was neither decent, nor elegant, nor fair, nor convenient, trying to intimidate me, as if I were unaware of what was happening at that moment, so that I would do nothing to ensure the money was sent. In fact, when you unjustly exiled Heraclides, in the opinion of the Syracusans and mine, because I asked you together with Theodotes and Eurybius to revoke this measure, you took this as sufficient pretext to say that for a long time you clearly saw that I cared nothing for you at all, but rather for Dion and Dion's friends and relatives, and that since Theodotes and Heraclides, intimates of the former, were in a compromised situation, I resorted to all means to prevent them from being punished. This is what there is of the political collaboration between you and me. If you observed reserve in me regarding you in anything else, you must logically think that all of it had its origin in the same thing. And do not be surprised, for any sensible man would rightly consider me wicked if he saw that I, seduced by the splendor of your power, had betrayed my old friend and host, who was in disgrace because of you, a man who was in no way inferior to you, not to use other words, and gave preference to you, his unjust offender, and obeyed all your orders to the letter for no other reason, evidently, than the lust for gain, for my change of posture, if such a change had occurred, would have been attributed to no other motive. This is the reality of the facts that have created, due to your fault, suspicion and dissension between us. The thread of the narrative leads me almost without interruption from what I have just set forth to the point on which I said the second part of my defense should turn. Examine and reflect with full attention, to see if it seems to you that I am lying and that my words are not true. I am going to refer to the fact that you, in the garden, in the presence of Archidemus and Aristocratus, about 20 days before my departure from Syracuse on my return trip, addressed the same reproach to me that you continue to address to me now. That I was more interested in Heraclides and all the others than in you. And in front of them, you asked me if I remembered that upon my arrival I advised you to re-establish the Greek cities. I answered that I did indeed remember it, and that it still seemed to me the most appropriate measure. And I have no choice, Dionysius, but to also refer to what was said next. I asked you on my part whether this was the only thing I had advised you to do or if I had also added something else. You answered me full of anger and in an offensive way towards me, as you believed, and certainly what you then uttered as an insult has now become a reality from a dream, telling me, if I remember correctly, while you smiled very forcedly, you advised me to do all this after having been previously instructed, and if not, not to do it. You have remembered perfectly, I replied. You continued, after having been instructed in geometry, or in what else? And I then did not give the answer that was occurring to me, lest a brief phrase close the desired path of return that was opening before me. But leaving this aside, the conclusion I intend to reach with this whole account is the following. Do not slander me by saying that I opposed your re-establishing the Greek cities devastated by the barbarians and your softening the situation of the Syracusans by converting the tyranny into a kingdom. In the first place, you could not invent accusations against me that less suit my character than these, and on the other hand, if a competent tribunal existed, I could present other proofs to refute you in addition to those adduced and even more evident than these, that I was the one who advised and you were the one who did not want to take the measures in question. And certainly there is no difficulty in openly declaring that this was the best thing that could have been done, both for you and for the Syracusans and for all the Sicilians. So, my friend, if you, despite having said this, deny having said it, I am satisfied. If you confess it, you must immediately, convinced that Stesichorus was a wise man, imitate his palinode and change the lie in your words for the truth.